Building wealth isn't just about hitting a number. It's about creating something real, something your family can feel and build on. Today, I'm sitting down with Danny Flores, a real estate entrepreneur and a family office builder who's turning investments into generational assets. He's breaking down what it really takes to go from deals to dynasty. Check it out. Danny Flores, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure to meet you at Raise Fest in Phoenix, a week or two ago, and I just found you very interesting. Would love to hear your story and how you got started. So please tell us a little bit more about you and what you're working on.
Thank you, Chandler. Nice to meet you at Raise Fest, and thanks for having me on. That's the reason why we do these events, to be able to meet like-minded people and figure out how we can potentially help them along, or maybe they can help us, or collectively, maybe we can do a project together. So you never know, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere and end up somewhere. And over time, and you build your network, you kind of learn to network with people and build a network of people and a list of other operators and other fundraisers that you could potentially tap into and do projects together. So it's a great thing to do that. So a little bit about myself. I started out, my first career technically was as a builder. My first 16 years was building. And then I decided that I wanted to change careers. And I knew I was good with numbers at that time. I had figured that out. And also I wanted to change and be a banker. So in order to do that, I had to go back to school and I had to get a finance degree. So I was lucky enough to get into USC, got a corporate finance degree. When I graduated, I was able to get a job in banking. And what we did as a banker, we did loans between $25 million to over $1 billion. And that's where I learned how to do a lot of underwriting, because we really had to underwrite these deals for these large loans. We also had to present to the credit department. We also had to structure the loans, the reporting requirements, the covenant requirements. So it was a lot of learning there, which really gave me a good solid foundation for what we do now. But my dream at the time was to buy multifamily. I've always wanted to do that, and I was able to save $65,000 in 2000, and I bought my first fourplex here in Norwalk, California. And I was able to sell that building for $100,000 profit a year and a half later. So now I had $165,000, and I did an exchange, 1031 exchange, so I wouldn't pay any taxes from the sale. Bought a bigger building, and I did that for about 15 years, just growing from one to another, with everything that I could, because I didn't always have the money to buy deals. I also opened up a property management company. I started one in 2006. I built that up, and I ended up selling it about 4 years ago. But in 2018, a friend of mine talked to me about syndicating. He explained to me what syndication was, and I said, well, I have to learn that. I knew how to find deals. I knew how to operate deals by then. I had the property management experience, the finance experience, the construction experience, but not raising money. So I actually hired a coach to teach me how to raise money. I hired a coach for a year. I learned how to structure the deals, the documents that you have to make, and how to present the deals. And once I did that, 2019 forward, it's all history. We've been buying larger deals, we raise money and help investors make money.
I find that very interesting. I mean, I'm listening to, how you got to where you are now, and you made a lot of pivotal decisions, right? From working in construction to, knowing you're a finance guy or a numbers guy, but needing to understand, I call it the language of finance. And,
Right.
getting that degree, then you go work for a institution where you learn how, right, you're dealing with the details, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're dealing with the details, you usually envision yourself being, higher up, right, when you're starting. But what were those skills that you learned, especially in that job, that you use now? Because, and it's probably like second nature to you, but you probably didn't like it when you were first starting.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in one of the main thing when you learn, you study finance, you have to understand the financial statements really well, the P&L. So it's not accounting, but you have to learn accounting really well. So luckily for me, the position that I had as a banker, we had to what they would call spread the financials. And what spreading the financials means is to put the financials inside a analysis spreadsheet that the bank has. And so doing that, it would give you the true economic position of that company, the strength of that company, where we were looking at, because we didn't finance any real estate companies that were all like, let's just say like Jack in the Box, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Yes Jeans. So they're all stores of some sort, right? So when they come in and they ask you for $500 million, you have to really understand, your primary sources of repayment, your secondary sources of repayment, and you're analyzing. So to answer your question, I got really good at interpreting the financial statements and understanding them, which was key. I had learned accounting in school, but it doesn't really sink in till you actually have to use it and understand it. And I had like all the senior guys help me do that, because I would struggle. I can get like, let's say 90% of it, but like numbers, 90% doesn't cut it. You have to have 100% correctness or accuracy. And so they would help me finish it and understand the last complex piece of it. And that gave me a lot of practice with that and really insight. So now that when we look at financials, I mean, that to me, they're pretty simple, right? They're T12. You got to understand where the money's coming from, right? You're collecting rent. You also have to understand where the money is going and how you're going to change that, right? You're changing that you're buying. When you buy a building, you're buying a business. So if you have 5 projects, you have 5 different businesses. They all operate independent from each other, but you have revenue and you have expenses. And at the end of the day, you have to have something that goes to the bottom line, right? It's really just that simple, but it's not, and it is in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And, it makes sense, I think, when you have the background, right? And when you don't have it, you're like, I don't understand what you're talking about, and because you had all these deals coming across your desk and you learned, all right, how to find, I call it like the intrinsic value of what it is you're looking at, right? You can interpret through all the minutia that's distracting. Right. Say, listen, we're either, moving forward or we're not with this opportunity. Right. And, what I'm, just heard you say was you weren't afraid to ask for help, especially from senior, personnel, because I realized that on my journey too. You have to ask for help to learn those tips and tricks where they can help you double check your work. And you mentioned you had a year-long consultant, right? How did that help, right? That you weren't afraid to ask for help, right, in this consultant world, and
right.
And use his knowledge to catapult your business.
Yeah, no, having a coach, and here's the difference is that we would have like a 1-hour call every week, right? And in that call, it consisted of one, talking about what you did during the week, but also looking at next week and saying, hey, listen, and she would tell me, you need to make, I don't know, I can't remember, but let's just say 2 calls to 2 brokers. You got to look at 2 deals. You have to submit 2 LOIs. Well, whatever the homework was that I got, I 10X'd it every single time, because my mentality was, I'm not dabbling in this. I'm doing this, right? I had a foundation, so made it a little bit easier for me to learn, calling brokers and kind of establishing myself. And I believe I was doing it in a different state. And I want to say it was Arizona. I can't remember, because the market in California was changing, and it's changed. So we don't buy anything in California anymore. But California was a great market, 5 years ago. Prior to 5 years ago, it was a great market to operate in. Now it's too much bureaucracy, so we were very active in Arizona. So you're kind of restarting your business, right? And so in doing that, you're creating relationships with brokers. That's the only way you're going to get deals, right? You got to create relationships. So restarting, so going through the coaching part and the homework that I had to do was also establishing myself in this new state. So when she would say, do this and do this, 2 of these, like I said, I did 20 of them. Wow. If I had do 2 calls or do 5 calls, I'm going to do 25 calls, because at the end of the day, that's how you get real.
You did the work, and most people don't do the work, right? So you were willing, and it's paid off, right? And you've had this goal of creating this multifamily portfolio.
Right.
How does it feel to have accomplished, right, that goal? And now that you look back, and you've always wanted to, you had this mathematics brain, you come from the world of GC, and you went through banking, and now you're looking back and you have this portfolio. How does that feel for you in your family.
No, it feels, sometimes I'm like, I always think like, wow, I made it to this point, right? There's still more to accomplish. But one of the things that I do every morning is I have a gratitude journal. So I write 3 things that I'm grateful for that morning. And many times I am writing something about what I'm doing in the business now, because I am forever grateful that I've been able to make it to this point. And each time, each push, each deal is always pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So when I talk to people that are starting out and I ask them, I says, why haven't you done this? Or why haven't you done that? And they're like, now I ask them point blank, are you scared? And they say, yeah, I'm nervous. I get scared. I says, well, you know what? Get used to that. Because I've done a lot of deals and I still get nervous and scared every single time. It doesn't go away. It's just part of it, right? You're kind of excited because you got a deal, but then you're nervous because you have to make it happen. You got to raise money. You got to put all your docs together. You got the attorneys you're dealing with. You got to do your inspections. And doing all of these things, you do them in about 60 days. You can't drop the ball. You can't buy a building and then say, oh, I wish I didn't buy it. Now I found out the roof is bad or the plumbing is no good. You can't do that. You have to go through. You have to be thorough. You have to check all the boxes. And so there's easier ways to do it. You create checklists. I think that's one of the things that we do is we have a checklist and what do we have to do? What inspection do we have to do? But it's nerve-wracking no matter what, because you're making progress. And so that's just kind of part of the deal. And I always say when I have partners and you get to stressful situations, it's like, hey, don't forget to have fun. We'll figure it out.
All right, you said several things that really caught my attention because you talked about, imposter syndrome. And a lot of entrepreneurs have that when you're starting out, right? Like you're this GC guy and, you want to have multifamilies and, multifamily can cost millions and millions of dollars, right?
Right.
How did you embrace it though? It's one thing to say, okay, just embrace it. But what do you do to embrace that scary feeling that we feel when like, oh, I don't, these guys are gonna say this about me, or they may not think I know what I'm doing. What did you do in those moments, right? When you did when you're either working to buy a deal and maybe you didn't know how to get the capital at the time, or you had to figure out how to get the capital. Can you share something, how you dealt with that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, you got to sit back and kind of make a game plan, right? And maybe you've never been there, right? If you haven't done any deal, maybe you've never been there, but you kind of have to fake it till you make it. You have to make the brokers believe that you can close the deal, right? Now, for us, it's easy to do now, but when you're starting out, you got to keep trying, right? And it's just like anything else, it's the reps. And maybe you're not going to get the deal, but you know what? The more times you try, the more you're going to learn and the more confident you're going to get. So it kind of goes back to don't be afraid of failing, because I guarantee you're going to fail. We still fail, but you know what? You just keep on going. You can't let that beat you up. You got to keep in the back of your mind, the more reps I do, the better I'm going to get. No matter what, you're going to get more comfortable. You're going to learn how to see more details. Maybe the last time you tried, you missed something. But you're going to remember that. So what are you going to do the next time you try? You're going to remember what you missed and you're going to make sure that you don't miss that again. So over time, because you're doing the reps, you're going to get more comfortable. You're going to build confidence and you're going to learn more.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden, it just happens, right? You do your first deal and the dialogue completely changes after you do your first deal. And now you can tell the brokers, hey, I just closed the deal down the street or in that city. And they'll say, yeah, I know that deal. Okay, I know who you guys are. And it's all different. I'm not saying it gets easier,
right?
But you get more deals, more deal flow, you get better deals.
I find that the learning is in the doing, right? You mentioned reps and putting in the reps, and you can only gain that confidence and put in the time and in that task. Right? So now that you've put in all these reps and you've accomplished, right? You can walk into the room and you said you still feel, maybe because the deals are still getting bigger, right? It's like the weight room and putting up more weight. You just don't go back to where you started. What deals are you doing now that, like you're like, holy crap, like I can't believe I'm doing this?
So here's one. Here's a scenario. and this just happened, right? We're in the thick of it right now. I get a call on Saturday from a broker, and I usually don't get calls on the weekends from brokers. But he called me, he's one of the biggest brokers in the area. And he says, hey, you know what? We got a deal, an off-market deal. So that means nobody else knows about it. Because we have an off-market deal. Do you want it? I'm like, okay, tell me a little bit about the deal. So I asked certain questions to kind of figure out whether it's something that we want to get. And it's not the biggest deal we bought. I mean, it's a big deal. It's close to 100 units. And and I can't say too much about it because we don't have it under contract. But so we get that call, we get the deal. He sends us, you know, all the financials that we need to see. We underwrite it and we're like, yeah, we'll buy it. So we're in the middle right now of, we've submitted an LOI. And one of the things that I do when I see a deal that's going to be a potential acquisition, then I call the team, right? The team consisting of the mortgage, the debt brokers, the insurance team, property managers, just to double check my numbers and just to see where we're at. And so that's where we're at. We're in the middle. We're waiting for the LOI to come back. Like I said, it's not the biggest deal we've done. It'll be relatively easy. And so the raise for this deal is around $4 million. So it's always nerve-wracking to raise money, right? You got to be able to raise money. In order to be successful in the business, you got to get deals. Got to raise money. That's it. If you can do that, and then you have to operate, right? But that happens after that. So we got to raise money. So I make my calls to my contacts and I say, hey, how quick can I put this $4 million together? Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes it's harder, but I kind of think we got it, right? We haven't even inked the deal, and I think we have all the equity that we need to be able to put the deal together. So doing the reps and getting good, building a history, puts you in a position where you're able to execute like that. And it's, from us, it's just sometimes it's just a matter of who we're going to call. But in between, when you're not doing a deal, you're talking to people, you're building relationships. And that's an everyday thing. That's the other part of doing the reps. Mm-hmm. Is you're talking to the brokers. They don't have any deals, and you're not always calling them to ask them about deals. You're calling them just to see how they're doing, see how their weekend was, see how their vacation was. Same thing with equity people, whether it's fundraisers or investors or whoever. You always have to be touching base with everybody, because you're not going to be able to make a phone call and say, hey, I have a deal. You know, we met 2 years ago at some event, but you don't even remember who I am. And I never called you, so we don't even have a relationship, right? That doesn't work. So that's kind of the results of just being consistent. You don't have to call 100 people a day, but let's just say you call 5 people at the beginning of your day, every day. And you have to be ready not to see any results, because you're not, right? You're doing the reps. You're not going to see any results. But when it happens, then your efforts pay off. And see, these are tricks. You know, like you said, a lot of people aren't going to do them, but these are the tricks right here. I share my secrets.
Yes, it's your checklist, right?
Yeah.
Five people a day. Following, not asking for anything, but hey, just thinking about, I remember the time we were at, XYZ event, and we were talking about, your daughter and this, how's she doing? Right. I think that's so important, and we overlook it because we're so busy. And
yes,
and especially in this business, right? You've grew this, because you said you're doing a $4 million raise, or potential in this scenario, $4 million capital raise, and you had a list to call, right? Some people don't have a list, or they have that list, but they met them 2 years ago, and you just can't ask for, them to invest. They're like, I don't even know what you're doing,
right? So I set trips up. Well, we're very active in Arizona. So every time I go to Arizona, I'm going to be doing lunches. I'm going to be doing dinners. I'm going to be meeting people. Aside from the work that I'm doing, looking at deals or looking at the projects that we have there, I'm going to be meeting people. And like I have a trip coming up to Arizona. I'm setting up lunches. I'm setting up tours on properties that we have there. I want to showcase what we've done. In doing that, this is what makes you successful. These are the things. Don't just go visit a deal and don't visit anybody. Go visit brokers, the brokers that you've been talking to. I have a rule that I try to visit 2 brokers every trip, whether it's having lunch with them, having dinner, happy hour, visiting them in their office, but let me show up just to say hi. And so they remember that, right? And these are the little things that create the success. These are the little things that get you on the A list of the brokers to make that, to get those calls and say, hey, you know what? We have a deal. Do you want it? Off market, no competition, easy peasy.
No competition, off market. I like
Yeah.
that.
That's the thing. That's what you guys should aim for.
I'm
But
looking down. I think that is a golden nugget.
yeah.
On how to get on the good side of the brokers.
Yeah. I mean, they're just people, right? They have to like you. It's just really that simple. They like you. You become easy to work with. Don't be a pain in the ass. Be fair and be transparent. That's it.
So that's the brokers. What do you do for, to keep nourishing your investors, right? To keep them, consistent and up to date on how their investment is going, right? How the project is coming along.
Yeah. So for our investors, we send out quarterly reports on all the deals that we have, all the investor groups. So we're telling them, first, we like to tell them a little bit of what the market is doing in the area. Then we like to tell them how the project is doing. Now, the other thing that we do is we also send out distributions. So we want the projects to pay out distributions. And so the investors like that, right? They like that mailbox money coming in. So they're happy. You're doing a good job on the project. They're able to send out distributions, one. And then two, once again, being consistent. So every quarter they know they're going to get a report on the deal. And then sometimes I'll get phone calls from them in between that say, hey, you know what? I got the report. Can you elaborate on something? And sometimes you don't hear from them. But either way, they know that they have a report coming, and they're going to know what their investment is looking like.
Wow. I find that's so important to keep up with your, investors, to keep them, hey, I know what's going on. So, you've addressed the management part, but what about how do you address, let's say something goes south, right? How do you address that? What do you do in that situation when you don't really want to talk about it, but you have to disclose this information?
Right. So I'll give you an example. We had a building where there was a homicide, and it wasn't like gang related. It was a brother that killed his brother, and I found out about it because it made the news. So the minute I see it, and I think I found out about it the same day. So the minute I find out about it, if it's going to be on the news, then maybe one of the investors are going to see it. But I'd rather them hear from me than from the news. So that's like an outlier, right? Aside from the regular quarterly reports. So we get on our investor portal, and we send out an email to the investors and say, hey, look, if this is what happened. There was a homicide on the property. It wasn't bad element. It was just a domestic dispute that happened. It's going to be on the news. Here's the link so you can read out about it. We'll just, we'll stand by and figure out what we're going to do after that, and kind of just let them know that you know about it, because you got to know about it. And then as we found out what was going to happen, and we clear out the unit and whatnot, then we kind of let them know what happened. We didn't hear it from any of the investors, but they knew what was going on. So and it could be maybe the roof gets blown off and you need to spend $50,000 on replacing a roof that you didn't anticipate, or it can be anything, something weird. Let them know what the issue is, and let them know what you're going to do about it. And then maybe sometimes you don't know what you're going to do about it. So you let them know the issue and let them know what you're doing to find out what the best course of action is. Because things are going to happen. It just happens, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think you said you addressed the concerns, you addressed how you're going to mitigate the issue and the potential options you're exploring in that moment.
Right.
And,
right.
And I think that builds the trust, right? And you're like, all right, Danny, we know how to handle this. And if you don't know, you'll figure it out. And having that confidence allows them to continue to invest in your deals and be a part of your, your investor club. And
Right. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Okay, so Danny, you have, you talked about brokers, you talked about, investors, and your story in getting up. And I want to kind of maybe jump back really quick. Did you come from this? Did your parents do anything in this realm within the GC world and finance, right, and raising capital?
Yeah, no, good question, Mike. My parents didn't. They immigrated from Mexico. I'm first generation here. They didn't have a lot of money. So I didn't grow up with, I always say, I had everything I needed, but not anything I wanted. Meaning the luxury thing. I didn't have luxury things when I was growing up. And so one of the things, so I do give my parents credit for, is that they sent us to private school. So they used their money. I have 3 sisters, so there were 4 of us. They used all their money to put us through private school. So they did do that. But other than having the cars, I mean, they didn't even buy cars for us when we started driving. We had to buy our own. But, you know, in doing that, we figured it out. We had money to buy cars. So no, I mean, I've had to figure it out on my own. It's been quite a journey and an experience, and fun and difficult at times. But and then to kind of transition to where I am now, I have 4 boys, and they're all in college now. And 2 of them do want to get in the business. And I tell them, I says, hey, you guys are super lucky because I can help pave the road for you. I'm not giving you anything. You guys have to earn it. But it's so much easier when you have that guidance and I connect them to people. I meet people, I meet coaches, and I make introductions to them already. So they're looking for jobs, they're submitting applications for interviews, you know, connected them to people who like coaching, the younger generation coming up and trying to get into a career. And it's been super helpful for them. And so, yes, they have an advantage, but they don't have, I didn't have that advantage. They just had to figure it out.
So when you were figuring it out, what pushed you? What was your like, why? Because a lot of times when you're going through something, you don't, you know, you're like, what? Why did you continue to push through the, you know, the most difficult decisions that you had to make versus, all right, staying in the GC world or going to get a W-2 where you could be mildly comfortable, but mentally, because you're an entrepreneur, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I think for me, part of it is it's just inside, something inside of you that just says, you know what, you got to go out and try. You got to take the chance to make more. That's the chance that you're taking, and that's the gamble, to make more than what you can do at a W-2 job. Will you make it? You know, in the beginning you don't know, or even towards the end you don't. Anything can change at the last minute, good or bad, so you don't know. I've always been a risk taker, but the multifamily part was that at a very young age I liked the stability that it can provide, meaning that you can buy an apartment building, and if you do everything right, you take care of the tenants, they pay you the rent, they're going to continue, that'll continue every day, every month, every year. And what happens with buildings, you have 2 things that happen. One, that the market gives you just appreciation on the building. And that's just basically it hedging against inflation. So as the value of the dollar goes down, the price of the building goes up. So that's one. The other part is market demand. So that'll also help drive valuation up. Thirdly, you can create forced appreciation, and you do that by improving the building, doing renovations. That gives you the ability to provide better housing for tenants. And because it's better housing, you're able to charge more in rent. Now, if you think about it, the only thing that stays constant in the whole equation is your debt. So if you think about it, debt devalues. If you have, let's say, a $10 million building, and you have a $7 million loan, you owe $7 million. And if you pay it down, you're paying that down, while your valuation goes up and your cash flow also increases over time. So that means that the percentage of money that goes to pay your debt starts shrinking. And your cash flow, your free cash flow, after your expenses and after your debt been taken care of, starts growing. And it's just really that simple. I saw that at a very young age, and that says, I want in. That's what I want.
Did the idea of debt scare you? Because normally debt is bad. How did you, transform your mindset to say, I'm going to leverage debt?
Well, debt is bad if you're using your credit card to buy things you can't afford to buy. Vacations, clothes, cars, whatever, right? Can you afford that? And those are not investments. Those are expenses. That's bad debt. But when you take, let's just say even a small building, you take $500,000 out of your bank account, and you piece that $500,000 with a $2 million loan to create a $2.5 million acquisition, right? So you're putting debt along with a little bit of equity, and you have a group of tenants that are paying that debt down, that's really good debt, because guess what? That money is not coming out of your pocket. And if it cash flows, then you get your equity paid back, and all of a sudden you have $0 of investment into this cash flowing building. How much better does it get?
Who knew leveraging debt could create wealth, right?
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's the biggest challenge in understanding how to make it work, right? Because everybody, a lot of times people will take on the debt, but they don't know how to like make those improvements, make those, are they doing cost segregations? Are they, you listed all those different options that you can
Right.
do to, increase, the cash flow that's coming in for that asset. And
Right.
those decisions, I think, are what's important, right? And it's that checklist that you have, um,
Right. Right.
help with those decisions and keep the ball moving, especially in that due diligence period that you mentioned.
Yep. 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 And
So,
you know what? Learning to do that is one, doing it, but two, partner up with somebody that can teach you that. Right. You don't have to learn it alone. It's very difficult to hit it right if you've never done it.
mhm.
So find somebody that you can partner up, that you can add some value to that group, whether you're raising money or whether you have a deal, and learn from somebody. It's probably the best way to learn, because there's so many moving parts. You have to understand the market. You have to be able to make small shifts and have foresight, knowing that if I shift here, these are going to be my results. And at the end of the day, you have to make these buildings, you have to make the projects successful, right? By charging the right amount of rent, by doing the right kind of renovations and improvements, and by controlling your operating expenses. And so that ends up being a lot of small moving parts that you have to understand, and that only comes from experience. You need to do what's hard for life.
I think your kids would benefit from your experience, as they are embarking on their career. And
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. They're in college right now, and part of the path that they're going to take is, do a 4-year degree, but they have to go out and find a job somewhere else and work their way up the ladder, learn from somebody else before they can come work with me. I think it's going to be interesting. The conversations are really shifting, and it's interesting to hear them sometimes speak about, cap rates and growth multipliers and comps and things like that. They've done some internships prior to graduating,
Mhm.
and so they've got their feet wet, and it's just, this as a father, it's just kind of cool to see them develop and to be able to help them develop at the same time.
I know you have to be proud. And I'm curious, is that your rule? They have to go work for somebody else? Usually you just, all right, come work with dad, and I'll show you how this works. So you're saying no, I want you to go out and learn
Yeah.
before you come work in the family business.
Yeah, so I put a lot of thought into how I was going to, first of all, they came and they told me at separate times, as they're finishing up high school and trying to make a decision on what they wanted to study in college. They came to me and they told me they wanted to get into business. So that was like a heart-touching moment for me when they said they wanted to get into the business, because I get to spend more time with them, right? I'm going to be talking to them all the time, and I enjoy being part of their lives and helping them develop. So that was like, okay, that's so cool. So then I had to think of, okay, what am I going to do, and how can I create a program for them to make them successful, right? And so I did, Jake. I talked to a lot of people. I've asked a lot of people that have brought their children up in the business. Some of them had them start raking leaves, cleaning toilets, so they learned from the bottom up. And then some of them did kind of what I decided to do, is go out and learn on somebody else's dime. So as I kind of did like a SWOT analysis as an example, so which would be the best path for them. And so I thought, like you said, okay, if I just bring them in to work for me, I feel like they're going to be limited to my abilities and my skill set. So I think it's better to go out and learn from somebody else first and get different training. The results may end up being too close to the same, but they're going to go work for a large company, acquisition company or something like that. I have one that's doing an internship this summer with a private equity firm. So they're going to learn other things. And the idea is to have them learn things that I don't know, or maybe I'm not good at, and then come back and combine all that and work together to build something bigger. If that makes any sense, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yes. I think that concept has been, shared in different realms of business, right? You look at the families that do business, and I think you've just figured out a way how to, that makes sense where you're adding value, right? We're not just
Right.
doing the same thing, but we can, hey, you're doing private equity, excel in that, and later down the road, we'll explore options, right?
Right.
And I think that makes a big difference for what you've created, because you've already started. This is essentially a snowball effect, and that all goes down the mountain. It's just getting bigger and bigger, and having your personnel, right, your children, well equipped to make those decisions, and follow the checklist, right? Or create their own checklist.
Yeah. And ideas, right? They understand. They say, hey, we're going to come up with new ideas, different ideas. We're going to bring those in. And that alone right there is going to be such a value add.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it'll give us the ability to create a family office where they can come in, they've got some training, they come in, they learn the portfolio, they can handle the portfolio rather than just throwing them in, if that makes any sense.
So explain that concept, right? Because I see the book behind you, Family Office, and I have an understanding of what the family office means, but I want you to lay it out. What's family office to you?
So family office to me is basically you built up enough wealth where now you create a team to continue growing that wealth. And then different family offices do different things, whether they buy businesses or they buy real estate or a combination of the two. It's always about doing investing and creating the highest return for the dollars that you invest and monitoring. So that's kind of how it is. And so being able to bring them in to and creating a family office, they'll be able to learn the business where there's always, in case, one day I'm going to pass, and if I pass away and everything's just thrown on them, there's no way they'll be able to handle it. It gives us the ability to teach and be ready for that transition when that time comes.
I find that, I think that's going to be very interesting, right? When you bring your kids in and you have, this family office, and you're thinking, right, generations down, right? Which I think, is wonderful, right? Where you can plan for the generations to come, and you're thinking about, cash flow, how to manage the money that you've created, and where to displace that, right? And different assets or, of interest, right? And giving back to the community, right? Where I think that's important. And, that is, I think, especially when you have children, that's the goal, right? How to manage, right? What everyone has brought in.
Right.
And I can see that's coming for you. What else? What is next for you? What are you doing now, right? As you're, from where you are now to when your kids will come on?
Well, so for me is to continue building the portfolio, continue building our relationships, and continue to grow our investor base. And just for us, and that's who we work for, right? We work for our investors. At the end of the day, if a project goes sideways, we're not going to get paid, but we can't have our investors' money lost. So we want to be able to produce for our investors and help change their or increase their family wealth so they have a better life, they can accomplish the dreams, and they can help their family. So being able to grow that and that ability to raise money and to touch more investors so that we can continue growing that part of the business as well. And then when my children come in, then we can blow it up even more.
Absolutely. I call that a family business.
There you go. Yeah.
So Danny, all right, thank you for coming on the show. How can people follow you? Is there anything else they can, keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, they can in any of the social medias that you can go in there and you can look for me. If you go to our website, www.primecapi.com, so that's primecapi.com, you can find me there. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Danny Flores under LinkedIn, and just follow me, and you'll be able to see. We try to post on the projects that we do and renovations that we do, and feel free to reach out. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Sounds good, Danny. Thank you again. And it was a pleasure having you on.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Chandler.
All right, that's it for today. Shout out to Danny Flores for coming through and sharing what it really takes to build a legacy. If you got value from this, make sure to subscribe, because around here, we're not chasing success. We build something that lasts, or develop something that lasts. Appreciate you tapping in. See you on the next one.